Greetings. Let's talk for a moment. So, I'm just going to touch on a couple of hot button subjects real quick because they all kind of swirl around one topic, and I've seen some, how shall we say, misstatements on this recently. So, a little bit of context for those of you that weren't aware. I reside in the north of Anstior, in the area that was just recently declared the incipient Principality of Vindheim. So I'm a resident here. In full disclosure, I am a ardent and long-standing supporter of the Principality movement. Now, what does that mean? What does that not mean? Now, there's a lot in both of those categories, but there's a couple of points I'd like to touch on very quickly, partially to help dispel some myths before they gain any footing and possibly hurt people, and also to spark a little bit of conversation and hopefully get more conversation going and better information circulating. So what does that mean? In short, it means we are a group of groups. We're a collection of groups within the north of the kingdom, all of the groups within the state of Oklahoma, and one group, Shire Bradley, the very northern edge, just below the Red River of Texas. Those compose Vindheim. We will be administered by a full docket of officers called Greater Officers of State, and that is per society law. We will now have those officers who are called Greater Officers, and we will be led by a royal, a territorial prince and princess, or prince and prince, or princess and princess, whichever the case may be, who are decided by a tournament roughly analogous to the Kingdom Crown tournament. Same format of fighters enter, they must meet requirements, they must be reviewed by the crown, they fight, and of course the victor wins the tournament. A couple of quick questions that I've heard asked. Will there be an heirs period where you have the victor of the tournament is learning the ropes before they become the territorial prince and or princess? And the answer is no. You win the tournament, you become territorial prince or princess that day. What's required to enter Coronet tournament? You must be a resident of the Principality. You must be a member of the society. You must be a authorized fighter, and you must meet the crown's approval. The crown will oversee the tournament, of course. Those are the requirements as I understand them. Absolutely, I've heard this asked and I've heard it answered. Same-gender consorts will be allowed. There has been a couple of newer people have asked, well, can I enter if I am transgendered or agendered, or can I enter if I pretty much insert your category? And I always direct those people back to the original criteria. Are you an authorized heavy weapons fighter? Have you been an officer in the kingdom for a year? Have you been an officer for a year? And are you a resident of the Principality? And if your answer to all three of those are good, or yes, then so far you're good. And then all you have to do is get the crown's approval to enter the tournament. And the crown has always retained the authority to review all entrants, and that has never changed. And lost my train of thought. 1 second. So, we're talking about what a principality is. What does that mean? I have heard some people say full-throated that we are no longer Anstiorans, that we are something else. The answer is false. We are still Anstiorans. That is a matter of black letter law. This is not up for interpretation. I don't really care what anyone has to say about their interpretation of tradition or society. We still answer to the Crown of Anstiora. We may still enter Crown Tournament. A fighter who meets all the criteria, who is a resident of Vindheim, may still enter the Kingdom Crown Tournament and become King of Anstiora. We are still her citizens. We are still the Crown's subjects. Full stop. There has been some arguments put forward that you cannot be both a Vindheimer and an Ansteoran, to which I will say you're wrong. And as a perfect example of that in the modern context, you can be a faithful Texan and a loyal American. You can be a faithful Californian and a loyal American. You can be a faithful New Yorker in the truly unique New Yorker belligerent style and be a faithful American. The idea of a regional identity dates back millennium and has never been a strong argument against fidelity or faith to a larger country or kingdom. So we absolutely can be faithful and strong Windheim residents or Windheimers or whatever adjective we want to choose, and be faithful and loyal on Stewarans. The two are not exclusive in any way, mutually exclusive in any way, shape, or form. There's been an argument put forward that we only did this to break away and become our own kingdom. Now, this I want to break down real quick. Are there people in Windheim who want to break away and become their own kingdom? Yes, I have talked with them. That membership exists. Are they the majority? We don't know. No one's done a survey. No one's asked the question. There has been no quantitative measurement as to what percentage of the North actually wants to break away. So we don't know. All we have is anecdotal evidence. And I know people who sit on both sides of that question. But even still, I can promise you with extreme confidence that we are probably at least 5 years away from having that conversation with any seriousness. And here's how I can say that. And it has nothing to do with attitudes or politics or who's on the throne or who wins the coronet tournament. The bottom line is numbers. When we submitted the packet to the board of directors to become a principality, we had 437 members. Now, the minimum number to become a principality is 100 paid members. And the board of directors said during the meeting reviewing that packet that we are well in excess of population minimums and there was no concern. But the board of directors has always required a massive buffer between the minimum and what your current status is in order to entertain any discussion of elevation of status or distinction of status. If the minimum number of people to form a shire, for example, were 4, they are very unlikely to seriously consider your petition if all you have is 4 paid members. They want 6, they want 8, they want 10. They want a buffer so that if someone moves away or someone drops out, you're not immediately in the hole. I can say from firsthand experience that when the Shire of Moonshadow petitioned to become a province, there was great discussion about membership. There was great discussion about buffer. The board of directors, it was well established, was not going to accept a minimum number. They wanted a buffer. Now, I have heard 2 arguments put forward. I've had 2 statements put forward about what type of a buffer they're looking for at the kingdom level. Now, one of those numbers was 50%. They want a 50% buffer between the dead minimum and the actual membership number. So if we talk about 50%, that means that we would need, as the North, 600 warm bodies, paid members, in order for them to even entertain a petition to become a kingdom. Now, the other number I've heard is double. That would mean we would need 800 members for them to even entertain a petition to become a kingdom. Oh, and those have to be long-term numbers. You have to demonstrate a stable history of membership at that mark. So let's take the more radical option. Let's take the most progressive stance, and let's say they want a 50% margin. I don't know if they only want 50%, but let's tilt the scales in our favor for a second. That would mean that every group in the north of Ansteora, the entirety of Windheim, would have to increase its membership by 50%. And then they have to maintain at least that 50% increase. They have to retain those members for probably the next 4, 5, or even 6 years with no substantial dips. Perhaps 1 or 2 groups could manage. If there was a dip and they were able to return later that same year, okay, that happens. But if multiple groups are taking turns diving down below the number to the point where the actual average is less than 50% over, it's less than 600, the board of directors could very realistically look at the packet when it hits their doorstep and turn it away. This is not a small deal. The board of directors takes its discussion points very seriously on these. And when they set their minimums, those are not there to make our lives difficult. They are there to assure viability of a group. Every time they vote on a group that fails, it's a black mark on them. And I'm not saying that to impinge the honor or dignity of the board of directors, but these are people whose job it is to encourage growth and encourage prosperity within the SCA. And every time they vote on a group that fails, that they take that home with them. That is something that is, they're not cavalier about it. I've talked to too many members of the board to believe that. So, in order for us, even if every member of Windheim wanted fervently to become their own kingdom, which they don't, as I've said, I know plenty of people who want to stay residents and members and citizens of Ansteora. We would have to increase our membership by a minimum of 50%. And if the board of directors decides, which they could, and I think very likely will, that they want 100% buffer, they want double the minimum before they even have this conversation, we would have to double the paid membership of every group in the North just to get the question on the table. And considering how hard it is right now just to maintain numbers in some areas and how slow our growth has been in others, regardless of where you stand on the issue of principality, regardless of where you stand on the issue of breaking away and becoming our own kingdom, I would submit to you that that conversation is 5 or 6 years off at the earliest. So that's, yes, I'm very emotional about this. I have my own opinions. And if anyone wants to know my opinions, please reach out to me. I'm not shy about this. I will be happy to qualify my opinions as opinions. I'll be happy to state my facts as facts. And if I am in error on any point of this, I apologize up front and encourage you to call it out in the comments. That is part of this conversation. But I did want to get that out there. I did want to talk about principality, what it does change, what it doesn't change, what it means, what it doesn't mean, and some of the time frames associated with possibilities going forward. So, thank you. God bless, and I'll see you at the next event.